Good morning, everybody. So, good morning. Back at it again, week 4. We are waiting for the very brilliant Shakirah Simley. My name is Trace Nelson. If you all haven't been watching the last couple of weeks, I am a chef and writer based in New York, and I am so proud to be bringing you these conversations weekly as a collaboration with BlackFoodFolks and Afropunk. So back at it again, we have 3 great conversations so far, and I'm so excited to be talking with, I see her right here, Shakirah Simley. So let me bring her in. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
You're brilliant. Your hair's looking glorious this early in the morning.
God. I was like, I'm a little lip for Therese.
Just a little polish. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm happy to be talking to you. Happy to be healthy and safe. So, yeah.
Yep. Yep. So when I started to think about the conversations I wanted to have, Clay and Colleen kind of gave me free reign, but the the idea of the politics of food is a really broad idea, and I think it has different connotations depending on what space you occupy. And so I really wanted the conversations to be broad ranging. I talked to Karen Washington, I talked to Davita Davison, I talked to Matt Rayford and Jovan. And you were certainly a person that was high on the list to talk to, mainly because I find your space in the world to be so joyful but powerful. And you have this way of balancing um, a kind of fierceness in your activism with a kind of humanity and a sort of like grace about the way you meet people and the work you do, right? Because you occupy so many spaces.
There's a
And
lot.
so in this moment, it felt like you were exactly the kind of person we should be talking to.
Mm.
And I was thinking, because just in preparing for what I hope will be impactful for this group of folks, is where I first came into contact with you, because you are such a particularly, I don't know, fascinating person. And there's a beautiful sort of ballet of experiences and references that make up who you are. And I feel like I was just trying to, like, when was my first interaction? When was my first sort of sprinkling of Shakirah? And I realized that my reference points for you, in especially in recent years, is always West Coast. But you're from here. I'm sitting in the middle of the barrio in Harlem,
I
and you
know.
are born and bred in right. And so I'm wondering if you could talk about sort of your origin story, like where you're from this place. You are from a place that informs so much of how you move in the world. And so what's your origin story, right?
Thank you. Thank you for that. So yeah, I was born and raised in New York City. I was born in the South Bronx and raised in Harlem. San Francisco made me, but I know where I come from. My accent comes out sometimes, especially when I get angry and I walk faster than most Californians. But I would say, yeah, so, my mom raised me young, teenage mom. I grew up on near 145th and St. Nick. That's where my family was from. And I grew up in a household of very strong Black women. My grandmother she was a Black Panther. She was a community leader. She was a social worker for substance for people who were abusing substances and also for domestic violence victims. My mom followed in her stead. I watched my mom finish high school, college, and her master's degree, raising 5 kids on her own. Um, and, I've seen her manage everything from holding people who, during the HIV pandemic in the 90s in New York City, to, working with kids coming out of foster care. So having that kind of, that strong grounding has always made me who I am. I miss Harlem. I love San Francisco. I've been here for 13 years. So this is like, I think I've had a really amazing community here, but there are certain things about New York that can never be replicated, as New Yorkers will remind you all the time. Um, and I would say it's been particularly hard watching my hometown during the pandemic. My uncle, he's a nurse in a public hospital, and we worry about him every day. And the numbers that were coming out of New York City, particularly in Black and brown neighborhoods, and we're ground zero. Our community is always ground zero when it comes to pandemics and emergencies. So that's been really tough. But I've been trying to do everything I can. At least I live in a Black neighborhood in San Francisco. I live in the Fillmore, and that was really intentional. We call it the Harlem of the West, and really making sure I'm looking out for my neighbors here because it's a diaspora of our, you know. So, but yeah, I never forget where I come from, but I have switched over to California. My family makes fun of me because I drink kombucha, but
Well, I mean, that's a really interesting, because I find it fascinating. I've heard you make the point that when you start to get really serious about activism in a broader way, or sort of a more sort of intentional way, that kind of San Francisco, the Bay Area, kind of called you. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that call was and what that looked like in terms of sort of uprooting your life. You're a young woman, and just one of the other things I'm so impressed by and sort of inspired by when I watch you.
I'm getting unfair.
I mean, yeah, we're similar age, but I think sometimes we discount how young we are, and the work we do is so, it's because it's so embedded in our lives, right? Like, you don't think about a career being absent of your day-to-day life. Your work and activism is so tied up in how you move in the world, so it's hard to sort of, I think you seem more, you're older, whatever, than you are because you're so wise. But that call to the West, I wonder what that was. And I'm thinking about young women, especially watching you, what that call was and what that looked like in terms of making your life work.
That's a great question. And I'm so glad you asked that, because that was such a threshold moment for me. I felt like I had graduated from college. A year later, the recession happened. And a lot of my friends were losing their jobs left and right. My first job I was a human rights fellow for the Commission on Human Rights in New York City. And after my fellowship was up, I was I had been volunteering with an organization in New York City that is amazing called Just Food, bringing CSAs and good fresh food. I mean, we didn't grow up with a lot of grocery stores. As soon as Harlem started to gentrify, that's when we got the Pathmarks and things like that. But we had bodegas. So I was working in my city job during the day and helping sling produce on the weekends. And I was looking westward toward the work of folks like Brian Terry, who were leading food justice movements in Oakland. I was looking at what was happening in Berkeley with Chez Panisse. I was looking at this whole new crop of people who were doing incredible work. And I was like, I got to be there if I want to be serious about food justice. But I always tell folks, for me, food has been on my lens, but people are always my focus. Always, always, always. It's particularly Black people, particularly Black and brown folks and women. So that's always been kind of my North Star when it comes to food, and my career and my activism and my history in this industry has always intertwined in those ways. So when I was done, my mom thought I was going to go to law school. She was like, finally, somebody in this family is going to make some money. And I was like, no. She was ridiculous. So she was not really happy about that, but I mean, she's so proud now. But I moved west and met Bryant. He is still my mentor to this day, 13 years later. I am so
shout out to Brian Terry.
Yeah, and really started, and I worked for a public health organization helping Black and brown communities deal with the root causes of chronic disease, helping young Black kids organize their school lunchrooms, helping EBT to farmers markets. It was an incredible. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made, and I went with a gut feeling, and it's something that has taken me all around the world and back to California again. So, and I'm glad to be here. It is tough. San Francisco is, we've lost our Black and brown population dramatically over the past 10 years. So that makes it very difficult. My neighborhood doesn't look like it used to. It doesn't look like New York. And, you know, for those of us who are still here hanging on, you know, we're like, let's make it happen, right? Let's make sure that we're creating spaces, either restaurants or kitchens or city hall, in a way that is reflective of our needs.
Oh, Shaq, we lost you. We lost your sound for a minute. Hold on. Shakira, hold on. I can't hear you.
Oh no, can you guys,
Okay,
can you not
good.
hear me?
You back. You back.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, perfect.
Okay. So yeah, in that time, like I said, it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. I've worked in public health. I worked in kitchens. I started my own preserves company using background urban forest food.
Slow jam.
Slow jams, the best name for a jam business ever.
That's right.
And I also have worked for amazing businesses like Byright, you know, running their community development programs for their 5 businesses. And also, you know, I was able, because of a lot of my work in activism, was one of the only Fulbright scholars to come to Italy and study cultural anthropology and food about 10 years ago. So it was the right choice. And I just had to listen to myself. Sometimes we say listen to Black women. I think it means listening to ourselves too.
That's that part. And so, because I think the reason the reason I wanted to start there, not just because it's the natural first place to begin, but I'm always considering how you calibrate your value system and how you calibrate the way you move in the world. And I feel like that the point you just made was so perfect, because it really is about sort of training yourself to trust yourself, training yourself to trust your instincts, and sort of to what feels right is usually right, and what sort of impacts the world in a particular way or a good way typically is like the right path to go down. And I wonder, there's so many things I want to talk to you about, but you like, I remember the shockwave that changed the world when we heard about your new, very big, untried, like, sort of, you know, position. I had never heard of you, but the director of the Office of Racial Equity. I mean,
Yeah.
that the title alone is like a door kick in, right? It's a mission statement, it's an ethos just in the title. And because it's a job that doesn't exist, you talk a lot about creating the world you want to see, creating the job you want to see, making the space that you want to occupy. It was such a revolutionary idea, and you were clearly the right person, the most perfect person for a job like that. But it comes at almost the exact moment that the pandemic hits, right? Like I wonder, one, like the origin of that position and sort of how you sort of came to occupy such a dope role, but then, and what your expectations were, what your goals were, what they still are, but how that changed when the world stopped.
That's a fantastic question. And I'm glad you're asking me this, because no one has really asked me this question before. So I appreciate you being so thoughtful and kind and gracious in this. So about 4 years ago, I decided to switch gears from working directly in the food industry to working on food from a more policy level. And I had already been doing a lot of economic and community development work. So when I switched over to city government, I was working on policies that would help the hospitality and restaurant industry. I was working on policies that would strengthen neighborhoods and small businesses. And I was also working on policies that would help, like, you know, our folks like get what they need in order to survive, from supporting nonprofit organizations to creating spaces for education as the director of a community center. And then in the midst of all of that work, I got poached as the director of the Southeast Community Center down in the Bayview District in San Francisco to work in City Hall as a legislative aide for our city council person. And she was like, you were going to be my policy person for equity, gender, race, housing, and homelessness. And I was like, are you sure you want me? She's like, you're the perfect person for this, because you know how to organize, you know how to be an advocate, you're very convincing, and you also have a lot of substance. Like, you know, you know, the work that we're going to be doing is not based on bullshit. And you know how to work really hard, which is what I did. And we did that. You know, we passed, you know, safe sleeping spots for people living in RVs. We, you know, put an abortion ban put a ban on contracts for states that pass abortion bans. You know, we passed more affordable housing in our district. And also we passed legislation which would create San Francisco's first office of racial equity, which is the first time in the city's history. It's not the first office in the country. There's other cities like Seattle that have had offices, but this, like with this legislative mandate, it kind of gives you the power to kind of step up and hold city government accountable for all the ways that inequity manifests inside city government and outside city government too. And I did not think I would get this job when we passed the legislation. But you know, the mayor's office, and you know, I work for an amazing woman, Director Cheryl Davis, through the Human Rights Commission, and for San Francisco, and the Office of Racial Equity is situated in the Human Rights Commission. And she like asked me to like, she's like, it's time for you to step up and do the work in a way in which is more visible, and to, you know, step into your power in the way in which we need you, and you get it. And I was humbled. I am humbled every day, and you know, step into that role, and was building my team, you know, creating a racial equity analysis for our city policies, you know, building our budget, and then COVID hit. And because I work for the city, when you work, I don't know if anybody on the line works for city governments, but you sign an agreement at the start of your service that says if there's any emergency or disaster, you have to be a disaster service worker. So everybody from like the mayor to you know, our folks who make sure our buildings stay like clean, everyone has to be a part of that. So for the past 12 weeks, I deployed as a disaster service worker, serving as the chief equity officer in our city's disaster response. So I pivoted. I still have my job. So I'm doing 2 jobs, but I have a different hat. It's like, how do we create a more equitable response to COVID? How do we make sure, looking at the data and who's getting sick, and who's getting hospitalized and who's dying from the coronavirus, how do we make sure they have what they need? How do we make sure that they have the care or isolation and quarantine hotel rooms or food, or access to testing? And this is what I've been doing day in and day out, you know, 12 hours a day for the past 12 weeks. And it's been one of the toughest things I've ever done. And I am so glad I'm in this role. I'm so glad I'm in this role, and I'm so glad I can show up for our folks, and also remain healthy and to do what's necessary. Because I think when we're talking about recovery, so the city's thinking about recovery plans, I'm like, one of the first industries that was devastated by COVID was our hospitality and restaurant industry, our workers. Yep. Those were one of the first businesses to close, first people to get laid off. And, you know, everybody knows if you work in the restaurant industry or grocery, wherever, your profit margins are razor thin. We're not set up for pandemics in this industry. And I have seen up close and personal the devastating impact that has had as this virus has cruelly worked its way through our Black and Brown community here in San Francisco, particularly for essential workers. And also our folks still have to work, right? We still have to pack the food boxes. We still have to like make sure people get the care they need at the hospital. We are still making sure that grocery stores remain open so people can eat. And that is incredibly worrisome to me. And I can't, it's tough. I'm really honest. It's really tough. So.
I mean, honestly, one of the first things I thought about, and first of all, just the comments are going off, but I just like thank you so much for your service, and I don't know. I'm thankful for you in the world, because I feel like there's one thing you so like humbly say, like, you know, you took this job you didn't think you would get. Like, there's this feeling sometimes like universe meets you where you are supposed to be, and like there's so many disciplines, so many sort of pieces to a puzzle that makes up someone who's perfectly suited for the work you're doing. That couldn't there's no path for where you are in the world, right? There's no job description that sort of encompasses how you get to be qualified to do the work you do. It's really just sort of collective experiences to make you ready for a moment, right? This moment happened because of all of these conspiring elements. And so I'm wondering, because I'm thinking about your self-care. I'm thinking about what you're saying on the sort of front lines. I'm thinking about um, how you feel about moving forward in your role. Um, what's been empowering, what's been challenging, and how you feel about sort of the next 6 months to a year to 2 years. Like what's the timelines you sort of thinking about? Or are you even at the space where you can kind of think forward? Because kind of like, you know, triage mode, that sort of place of deprivation, that place of like trauma, the sort of like immediate trauma, a lot of times precludes us from thinking about future plans and sort of laying like foundation for plans. I'm wondering if you're thinking about that at all right now.
I am. I love all your questions. I wish we could like. Sorry, Afropunk, we're just gonna take over and so they hang out with me all the time.
Exactly.
Yes, I'm thinking it's a yes and. So the day to day, you know, I do have to wear two hats thinking about how do we triage now, but also, you know, to create some context for this, like our communities were already dealing with the slow disaster that was happening in our neighborhoods. We have been dealing with a pandemic of a different scale and a different scope for decades. And this is why I like Black folks are particularly resilient, because we know what it's like to not have, to be inconvenienced, to have to save, to have to shrink, and also to how to survive, you know? And I feel like in some ways, like we have a lot to learn from that and to not lose that in dealing and in our response to the coronavirus, even though we see it, you know, rapidly working its way, you know, stealing our elders and taking down our health workers, and you know, making church places where we find hope and healing, like our churches or over, you know, a dinner table, dangerous, right?
Yeah.
So I also think that, and yeah, I've seen it up close and personal, and I've seen, you know, people sick. I've seen, you know, the situation with our folks who are houseless on our streets. San Francisco has a homeless population that is almost 40% Black, because our, you know, decades-long disinvestment in like affordable housing policies. And it catches me where I feel at home. I'm not much of a crier, but I've cried a lot more.
Absolutely. You got to release that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I have an amazing partner who's been like so incredible. And
Shout out to the partners of hospitality workers, like frontline activist workers who aren't necessarily in that space. It's like the support that you have. Preach on
he
that
holds
part.
it together. He's like, "Did you drink water? Have you eaten? Drink some
Yeah.
coffee. I washed your underwear." Like, thank you. Just like,
yeah.
really, just simple, kind. You know, I just love him. And I would say that when I'm thinking about the future and what recovery is, I'm not sure who, based on our capitalist, like white supremacist system, who will ever get to recover from COVID, right? Because there's already systems in place that are set up to stop us from achieving that. And I would also say that pandemics and emergencies are times when you can be flexible. And over the past 3 months, I've seen city government be as like so flexible and be able to shift, be responsive, and that to me is hopeful. My only thing is like if we're able to turn around and provide like housing for essential workers, you know, who need to, you know, have a safe place to go while they're working, or if we need to provide like sick time to folks who need it, additional sick time, or if we need to, you know, make sure we have distance learning opportunities for kids who are in digital deserts, right? Like in all these different ways that we can be
Mm,
responsive as a city. Some of that needs to stick. It can't just be like, oh, we did that during COVID and now it's back to normal. And I said this,
right.
I've been saying this over and over again. I was like, this society was not normal for so many of us, and we can't go back to that. And I don't want to hear new normal because that means that y'all ready to go back to a status quo that allows you to like have your conveniences at the expense of Black and brown bodies. And we're not doing that. We're not doing that anymore. I'm not doing that.
That's right.
Exactly. So I am so inspired by the community-based response of mutual aid societies,
Yeah.
of, you know, cooking plates and making sure folks eat, or going to make sure folks have groceries, or sharing childcare responsibilities, and
Yep.
also pushing that we've seen on governments on policies that we need, right? So,
Yep.
you know, the whole movement to cancel rent, right? For residents,
Yeah.
like that's a people-led movement. I would also say we need to, for the food industry, we need to cancel commercial rents or have
That
commercial
part.
forgiveness to make sure that our restaurant owners can come back online in a way in which they can protect themselves and their staff in a safe way. So like I think it's a yes, and I'm seeing from a government perspective, which you have to like be mindful of because you can't be as radical when you work for a city government. And you know, I try to stay true as much as I can. But you know, push, and see what sticks. And
Mm,
people being flexible, and creative and innovative, and that's exciting. And I want to see what comes out of that. And it's not over yet. I will say to everyone who's listening to please, we will have surges. Um, so as society opens back up and, you know, public spaces become more available, social distancing is not going away for a long time. Wearing masks are not going to go away for a long time. And, you know, washing your hands and things like that, you know, not sharing food, those things are not going away for a long time. So until we have a vaccine, and I just want folks to know to like continue to protect the health and safety of yourselves, of your community, and of your families. But let's think about what sticks and how we can use a pandemic to be flexible, agile, and adaptive. And I think everybody should be reading Octavia Butler right now to help us understand
exactly.
how to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. Um, it was still, like I said, there was so many things I wanted to talk to you about, and I'm also interested in, because I feel like, you know, you talked about the shift you made into policy and the work you're doing now. Um, my first reference point for you was sort of directly in the food world. I mean, your jam company, but also your writing is so beautiful. Um, the your Fulbright scholarship and sort of the work you were doing in Italy was interesting. But I'm I'm wondering if you're thinking about like a lot of the thought you had before you took this job was sort of thinking about being embedded in food and looking to policy, and so now you're in policy and
Mm-hmm.
making effective change, looking back out at the food world. And I'm wondering what perspective you have being sort of removed from food directly. What you're thinking about the way we're moving right now? What sort of immediate changes we can make in community wide in food to be, I don't know, just do better, because I think that's the big theme that you sort of champion in your life and your work and the way you move. It's like you legit have to just person to person, day to day, and the space you occupy, just do better. So what could we be doing right now to just do better, even if it's a small thing?
That's a great question. And I would say, you know, what I'm looking at right now, now that I'm in a place where I, as a decision maker and policymaker and working with other policymakers, I think people take food for granted. But the thing about it is like everybody eats, right? We've all seen that. And we need people to lobby for food, not just for big food, right? I'm not talking about like the restaurant association, the other NRA, or, you know, big soda. I'm talking about we need people to
Mm-hmm.
lobby for small food and organize across businesses. And I think we need that kind of groundswell in order to push city councils, mayors, governors to do the right thing on behalf of our farmers, producers, grocers and bakers, restaurant people. And because they don't really have a voice at the table. And I would say that moving forward, I think it's not necessarily about the food itself. It's about the infrastructure and policies that impact our ability to get food on the table. So I want to hear, I do want to hear a restaurant owner's opinion about affordable housing, right? Or how do we get more affordable health care to food workers? Or how do we make sure that our public transportation system works, right? Because oftentimes our workers rely on that system to get them to and from, and how can that
Yep.
be better? I want to hear about one of the things that we can do as individuals and communities is that we know for a fact that food insecurity is going to skyrocket. We know that we've seen places in which our industrial food system is failing. We've seen that with Tyson and other these huge meat and slaughterhouse companies that are breaking down because of the disrespect they give to animals and also the disrespect they give to their workers. So how do we, if we know that that industrial system is not going to serve us and we need to focus on a more localized food system, like how are we reaching across the table to all of us to say, no one in our community goes hungry, right? No one in our community is going to not have health care. No one in our community is not going to have a roof over their head or have to sleep in a car or a tent overnight in order to get to work every day. No one in our community is going to not be able to access the educational opportunities that they need, right? And we've done this before through the amazing work of organizations like Restaurant Opportunity Center and movements through Fight for 15. A lot of that stuff was fought by, Black, brown, queer workers of color working in, Applebee's or McDonald's or Burger King and Walmart who had enough was enough. So we need to learn all the and take that and push for that. And, my friend Navina Khanna, who runs HEAL here in Oakland, has an incredible policy platform, which I think everyone should take a look at. Think about how we can do this from a holistic way. But I think we can do this I think we should start local, like start with our own communities to say like, hey, we want to make sure that this restaurant comes back online. This was the living room of our community, right? I knew all the people that worked there. How do we make sure they have what they need? How can I help somebody fill out a PPE loan? How can I make sure that, if someone needs childcare, right? Like we can do this. I am hopeful. We will have to model for ourselves. Black people always do that, right? We set the tone, we set the culture. And then suddenly it gets like, oh my God, colonized, in short. And I would say that, for folks like, there are a lot of people like me sprinkled across different city governments, right? Like find us, talk to us, push us. I'm like, the community is saying this, we gotta respond to community. I want to hear that. And I think it's important that folks hear that and not lose hope. There's a lot of money and resources tied up in local government that will have to be directed towards recovery. And a lot of cities are starting to think about that. So I want everyone to be paying attention to those processes and make sure that they're injected in that so we can make the change that we want to see definitely on a local level. So, and I try my best to share out and communicate and connect with, my folks here in San Francisco. There's a couple people in the comments I see with hearts and waves who I do this work with. But it's not just here in California. It's every city. It's every neighborhood. And I'm hopeful about that. And that's going to be like, we're going to be dealing with the impacts of COVID for years to come. But how do we set ourselves on the right foot from the start? And now when things are nimble and adaptive and sticky, let's make sure that they can pass.
Yeah. I want to leave room for questions in a few minutes, but I feel like there's so many things. I don't know. Your mind is so, dexterity is the word you use. This one I love so much. But the way your mind works and the way you consider problems and problem solving has always been fascinating to me. And there's this piece you wrote for Julia Turshen's book, Lead Resistance. And it was sort of about how you were thinking about food and use the device of talking to your brother about sort of moving in the world.
Yeah.
And it was so stunning because you put into words so many conversations we have in community with our young people, with ourselves about um, the realities of how we have to move. And it's like that balance of reality and sort of sobriety and the realities of like just maintaining your spirit and maintaining your life in a lot of ways in this world, but also still being hopeful and joyful. Um, and I'm wondering, because I wanted you to talk about that piece because it's so beautiful. And if people haven't gotten that book, it's such a beautiful little like jewel of like what can we do in community. It's a tiny book, but it's so dope. And Julia Turshen is brilliant. But
Agreed.
that piece really, I mean, of all the things I had known about you, known of you spinning ether for a while, but that piece really sort of spoke to, I don't know, it felt like if somebody wanted to know what you are about, what your life work is, who you are as a person, that piece to me sort of said it so succinctly. So I wonder if you could just talk about that and maybe just if any of that is resonating with you in these moments.
It is. Thank you for lifting up that piece. That was probably one of the hardest pieces I've written because it was right after it was I think we had a particularly bloody summer. And my brother, he's 26, he's like 6'3", tall, quiet, nerdy black kid with a hoodie. And I fear for him every day. Every day. He lives here in San Francisco. And I think everybody should watch The Last Black Man in San Francisco to get a tiny glimpse of that experience. But we've been talking to my little brother about this. So he's 26 now, since he was 8 or 9 years old. And I was just thinking, I'm like, will there ever be a time where I don't have to talk to my brother about how he should change his body, his mannerisms, and speech when it comes to being in a situation with law enforcement, given how fucked up the system is and how it treats Black bodies. And it also got me thinking about how within the food system, within the good food system too, right? So there's a set of social values and high-mindedness that I think folks have in regards to, we're bringing good, delicious, organic, fresh, local food to our tables and using that as a way of connection, but missing out on the racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and classism that is linked to that system too. And how, as a Black person, I'm not like a Black person and then like a food person, right? Like those things we live intersectional lives, like Audre Lorde said, like we don't lead single issue lives. And I will always bring that perspective, even if it's deeply uncomfortable to particularly my like white colleagues in food. And I also felt like I needed something to just be out there so people could understand how to hold themselves in this movement, how to not center themselves and pat themselves on the back as being an ally when they don't want to do any of the physical, emotional, financial work, to make things happen. And also, what kind of future I want to build. So hopefully I don't have to have these conversations if I ever have a son or daughter. And I appreciate you bringing that piece. It was really hard to write. It was deeply personal. I had to talk to my brother before, we published it. Really grateful for, Julia to include me and so many other amazing, amazing writers in that little tiny, powerful book. So I really hope everyone picks it up. I think it's still relevant for today. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's something I'm just going to keep holding and talking about, so we don't, like I said, we can talk about food as our lens, but people always have to be our focus, particularly Black people. So
Yeah, because you are really good for a smooth hot take and sort of a quotable moment. And one of the things because you're just so profound and like the way you do, like I said, the way your mind works is so dexterous and beautiful. One of the things I've heard you say that has really stuck with me over the years is it was sort of about accountability and sort of how we move in spaces that aren't all Black. I think for myself at least, I occupy a culinary world that is so particularly Black, is so specifically community based. That is, I forget sometimes that the larger context is typically not, right? It's a interesting paradigm to sort of move through. And you talk a lot. You talk about, because we use, again, like in all spaces, right? Like words become part of zeitgeist and they become trite when we don't say what we mean, right? We use these terms that mean something that maybe they don't actually mean. I remember, like, there was this moment, I don't know how many years, but there was a moment where we kept talking about allyship, right? And this idea about how in our communities where we having these issues that are so insular, that we look to broader culture to sort of find allies that will sort of say and help. And you talked about, you made this distinction that has been the most paradigm shifting idea for me. But you talked about this idea about not being an ally, but finding accomplices. That distinction is so revolutionary to me. This idea about allies they have was it plausible deniability, right? Like an accomplice is not in it, that the allies are not in it. Accomplices have skin in the game. And I wonder if you could talk about like that shift, like that sort of distinction and sort of how we hold our allies accountable to be accomplices.
So I think, thank you for bringing that up. It's something that I've also been thinking about this a lot, COVID, because I'm like, who has the benefit of staying home and who doesn't? And who has the benefit of not having to show up, even if you're healthy and safe and privileged and not. And I feel like, I'm not a gatekeeper at all. I try to meet people where they are. Being an advocate, being an activist it's tough. And I feel like I never try to like dissuade people from being able to show up and do something that's meaningful. And I'm like, who are you showing up for? Are you showing up for you, or are you showing up for the movement itself or for the community? And how can you decenter yourself in a way that connects to the collaborative in the community versus the self? And I think a lot of different cultures and a lot of different movements have that same sort of center. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's like my idea per se, but I think it's been really important to me to make that distinction because I've been doing this work for so long, and I have to be really mindful about where I put my thought, my action, and my energy. And I want to invest in the relationships in which that is the case, where folks, you do have skin in the game. I'm like, what power are you giving up in order to stand with me at the front lines? But if my Black body will just be a shield or a token, then I'm not down for that at all. And what kind of mental, emotional, physical, financial labor are you going to do in order to allow us to do this work? Because we've done this work for you for centuries. So, and people are hip to that, some people are not. But I'm also like a doer, right? Like I'm out there. It's funny that we're doing this on social media because I think I'm terrible at social media, and my Instagram is like I'm kind of in the know, but like not really. So I think our online activism has to be met with our offline action. And I'm hoping that people really hold this right now with COVID, because yes, like please come and help us like pack grocery bags, right? Like put on a mask, get your sanitizer, get some gloves and do the work. Like, yes, please help us make sure that people have, language capacity when they go get tested. Like there's so many different ways in which we can be doing this together and do best, which is nourishing people as food people, that I want to keep centered in this conversation. And I at least for me, and other people might have different ideas, but given how long I've been doing this work, which has been, over 16 years at this point. This is just where I'm just particular with how I'm going to invest my time in the company that I keep. And that's just where I am. I mean, that might change, but I'm still learning, right? And I also I don't know everything. I love to keep, I'm friends with a number of older women who check me all the time. I kind of love it because I just like to know what's coming around the corner. And then also, like I said, if understand if something is really spilt milk, you know?
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I mean, that brings up a really interesting, again, we can we about the 45-minute mark, but that is a really interesting idea that maybe we could talk a little bit about. I'm really interested in this sort of intergenerational. I've always been concerned with, and considering, the sort of intergenerational play. Some of the things that is so fascinating about you is the lineage of sort of activism you come from, the lessons that you learn, that sort of the posture that you move in the world with, sort of is informed so much by the women who raised you, right? And I think also there's sort of this generational trauma sometimes we feel with our mothers, our aunties, our grandmothers, because they lived in a different world, right? They occupy space in a different way than we do. There's professional trauma with sort of having to be the only one watching us move in a world that, while we feel maybe limited, is way more transformational, transformative than they were able to occupy. And I wonder, because you talk about, because the company keep was a message and a word on its own, but this idea about really being intentional about intergenerational conversations, but also creating kind of relationships, kind of connections forward that will hopefully sort of break this sort of weird traumatic cycle. And so I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what that looks like in terms of consideration. I know for me, it's all of the writers that are it's the Jessica Harrises, it's the, you know what I mean, it's the I don't know, it's Vermeer, it's going back to Vermeer Grossman, it's thinking about all of those through lines that sort of give us those perfect jewels of blueprint, and then sort of holding younger women accountable, younger people accountable, to think through those through lines as well. So I'm wondering what that looks like in your work, because you occupy so many spaces where you, just by your presence, is probably inspirational for young women, and affirming for older women. So I'm wondering what that intersection looks like for you.
That's the best questions. For me, it looks like not getting comfortable, and not wasting all the work, energy, and time and labor that I have the privilege of stepping onto in order to further myself. And I think, just even between me and my mom, where she was when she was 35 and where I am, I have so much more freedom and independence and financial stability than she did. And it's still hard. And yet, I always keep that in the back of my mind. And I also feel like sometimes I'm also pulling her along too, to understand what's possible and opening. And it takes time, and it takes grace, which is, I've been trying to better understand this notion of radical grace, and understanding, how, in forgiving myself, understanding those transgressions in which there is trauma, there's shared trauma in our community, particularly between Black women and intergenerationally. And how does that get us to something that we never dreamed was even possible? And I feel like that's really special. It's still something I'm grasping with. I'm grateful for the opportunity to get older and be in spaces with women who just they roll their eyes. I'm like, this is a problem. They're just okay, yeah, welcome. And that humility is necessary. And I think it's exciting for them too. Like, you know, it's like, oh, we're doing this. Oh, we're going here. Oh, we're and so yeah, I think it's a balance of not getting comfortable. It's holding that grace in those moments of tension. It's remembering that like the fullness of our identities, you know, I think that it's not just Black, right? It's just like, you know, the multiple identities that we carry, if we're queer or, you know, it just, you know, we're expanding our identities within the Black community and understanding the fullness of that and making room
Yeah.
for that. And I think our generation is doing that really well and
Yeah.
changing that narrative, which is super important, and not having what being Black means to be very pigeonholed and prescriptive and heteronormative and sexist. Um, so I think like that's extremely powerful and continue to do that work. And also, you know, I don't know if you hung out with any kids lately, but I'm like, we're gonna be okay. Like all the little Black babies that I get to hang out with and and see, and um, I'm so like my godson. He's 11 and he's like an indigo child. So I'm just like I like you get it, you get it. I don't get it. Like we're gonna be in good hands. So I'm ready.
Yep.
But then I'm also like I still got to keep working to create the world in which you know
Thank you. Yeah.
grow up in. And he's gonna be pushing me, and I'll be the old auntie, being like, "What is this?"
Mhm.
So I'm
Yeah.
excited about that. I'm excited about that.
Oh, it's so good, so good. So we're
Yeah.
getting close now. Don't know. There's so many good people who've been paying attention to this conversation for the last 40 minutes or so. I'm wondering if anybody has any questions. Um, yes, signing up for lifetime curriculum for School of Radical Grace. That's I told y'all, Shakirah got the hot take. She got the perfect quotable that's gonna stick with you because it's these ideas that are so broad and so I think sometimes think that the changes that we know to be right and true, um, we think we know inherently, but they feel so insular sometimes. And I think
Mm.
having those ways to verbalize and sort of qualify what that looks like, what that means. You know, radical grace is when you say it, people it resonates immediately, right? People know exactly what that should feel
Yeah.
like, what it should look like. And if you don't, then that's like it's almost like a call to your own life to sort of do better, sort of be more thoughtful, because to feel that, to sort of give that, it's such a joy, right?
Mm-hmm. Maybe
Um,
we should write an essay about that. Maybe we should do that. I'm still grappling with the concept. Like, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for community? So maybe you and I
mm,
can write something together about that.
yes, yes, writing prompts. I've been thinking
No, right?
you such a
Who has the writing
no,
chops here?
seriously. I've been sort of, talk of the places you occupy. I'm just thinking about sort of being a better writer. I'm thinking about somebody like Kisei Layman. He was, like I said, were you at SFA last year?
I wasn't, unfortunately. I missed out.
Yeah, I've never been, but the viral, to my mind, viral, the video of him at SFA was so brilliant. His book Heavy, like, is sat with me so dramatically since then. But he does these really interesting writing prompts on Facebook, where it's just kind of like, um, you need a support system to enact. Um,
Yes,
hey,
you do.
hey, sorry, I'm like, we all chatting it up. I'm like,
Hey,
just
Wanda.
trying to,
Hey, Portia. I'm saying Lil is
yeah,
wonderful.
Clancy and Rima Sil, we need a support system to enact that.
Angie's in
Reem, what you,
the chat. Georgiana's in the chat. I love it.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really see any direct questions, but you so perfect, you brilliant. So it's like I think we covered so much. Maybe people just trying to sit with. Um, oh, thank you, Tanya. Sit with all the things you share with us. Yeah, I don't want to hold you anymore. I think we're getting pretty close. I don't want to get cut off, but I'm so thankful for you. I'm thankful for the sacrifice you make to do the city work and sort of activist work you do. It takes so much. I think we not discount, but I think it's very easy to take for granted
Mm.
that these mechanisms work and that they work outside the idea of who's actually making them work. And you sort of are a really brilliant example of like what sacrifice and work looks like. So I don't know, it's
Mm.
just really dope to watch you move in the world. And I don't know, folks should be looking for more Shakiras in their communities to reach out to as first steps to sort of
I mean, there's some in this chat. There's there's some
yeah,
people.
definitely.
So I appreciate that, and I feel like this was not a sacrifice. This was just a grounding, and I appreciate all the like thought and energy and this that you put in this conversation to like pull me out of myself and this like using exhaustion and busyness as like an excuse, but like to just be connected and see each other. And I would love to feed you one day. So please, when this
Same, same.
please come to San Francisco. We
Yes,
just
yeah, massive cooking.
we
Yes,
just
massive
did
power.
a pandemic garden outside, which I'm
I love
currently
it.
a standoff with a neighborhood cat around my blueberries. But like I'm just hoping for, you know, the opportunity to grow something and to feed people, and hopefully we get to do that soon. So
Yes. Thank you so much for doing this.
thank you. And thank you everybody in the chat for watching and for I am so deeply appreciative of all of you, and please take care of yourselves and stay healthy and safe. We need each other.
Yeah. All right, lady. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll see you soon.
You too. Okay, folks. Y'all just got your life. Shakirah Simley is everything. People said 2020 Shakirah Simley. I agree wholeheartedly. So we did it. Week 4 on the books. If you are, please think about going over and supporting BlackFoodFolks. They're the ones bringing you these conversations. You can, the Cash App is BlackFoodFolks if you are interested in supporting. And later on today, Portia Wilson, who's the most extraordinary writer, is going to be in conversation with Crystal Mack, who's another really brilliant young woman, activist, chef, entrepreneur based in Baltimore. So that conversation is over on BlackFoodFolks feed at 3 o'clock. And then tomorrow, Tunde Way and Osai and Dylan are in conversation also over on BlackFoodFolks, I believe at 1 o'clock tomorrow. So it's going to be a good week. If you go and follow BlackFoodFolks, you can sort of find out what other programming is going to be happening the rest of the week. But today, definitely mark your time, set an alarm for 3 o'clock, and go over and hear what should be a really beautiful conversation between Portia and Crystal. So thank y'all so much. Please follow Shakirah. She's brilliant. If you're not following her already, follow the work she's done, read her beautiful writing. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Next week, I'll be talking to Michael Twitty. It's always a powerful and interesting time. So see y'all next week.